But thank you for being here, really, on behalf of the kids, and hopefully we'll be able to get to a lot of questions. The last group asked some great questions. My name is Dr. Tom Demaria. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been one for 33 years. That's where I got all my gray hair. And I do work in trauma and loss. I've been involved in about 300 or so major disasters in the United States and overseas, everything from Parkland to Sandy Hook to the World Trade Center terrorist attacks to a lot of bad things I've been involved with. And I also have a clinical practice. I worked as a school psychologist for a while, and I greatly admire anybody who works in a school because you guys are our front lines. You're truly our first responders. You're there when the problems start, and you got to do a lot of important work. Today we're going to talk about stress, and then we're going to talk about resilience, and then we're going to talk about these things called parents. Does anybody know parents that you have to work with? Yeah. Sometimes parents and stress go hand in hand, but we'll talk about those too. But really, the opportunity to comment and ask questions is awesome. If you want to do that during the presentation, just raise your hand. Paige is clicking ahead, so I do this. It's not a tick. That's how I advance the slide. So if I do this, don't worry about me. If I do shake uncontrollably, then you can, but usually it's okay. But again, we're going to talk about stress, resiliency, and mistakes parents make. But I want to tell you a story about a case I so long ago in my practice that taught me a little bit about stress. A father called and said I needed to see his son immediately. So I said, "Oh, okay. Is it a crisis?" "No, he has to come in." 7-year-old boy. So he comes in. This little boy comes in, and he sat down. I said, "Okay, what's bothering you? What's going on?" "My father says I have too much stress." So I said, "Oh, 7? He's got a long future." So I said, "What does your father want you to do here?" He goes, "He wants you to get rid of it." See, I'm not in that line of work. I don't do that. He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I can help you with stress, but I can't get rid of stress." And I'm not going to explain stress to a 7-year-old, so I got the father on the phone. He was very mad at me. I didn't get rid of his son's stress, which I'm sure parents get mad at you guys sometimes too. And I had to explain a little bit what stress is, and that stress is part of life, but he had no clue. So he didn't want to see me as a therapist. I got fired. And that caused me stress. So 6 months later, he came back and he said, "None of the other therapists are helping get rid of my son's stress. But at least you're honest with me. You can't get rid of it." Like it was a disease. And I said, wow. So I've been studying stress during my whole career, post-traumatic stress, stress in horrible situations, and stress that you guys feel as people, parents. So hopefully this workshop will have some applications, not only for the work with your parents and the children you work with, but also yourself. So the first thing, what is stress? Seems like everybody misunderstands it. People call it panic attacks, people call it anxiety, people call it a lot of things. And a lot of people think stress is bad. Like, "Oh, I'm under stress today." And I said, "Okay, so am I. How are you?" Getting up this morning, how many people like to get up in the morning? Is there any of those people here? Nobody ever says that, right? When you get up in the morning, aren't you kind of like, "Oh, I was up too late last night. Somebody was making noise. I have to make coffee." Stress, right? But you get up because why? You want to get your credits to come here. You want to be inspired. You like to drive in traffic, whatever you like to face in life. You came to be here, but you had to embrace stress. So what does stress feel like? We got to kind of recognize it in ourselves and certainly in our children. And what is stress management? And more importantly, the goal of this is to talk about resiliency. And the problem with resiliency is nobody understands it and nobody does it right. So hopefully you guys will be better able to help children become more resilient. So start off with some terms that are going to be important to kind of understand, because sometimes when language is not clear, it kind of confuses us. The first thing is that in response to the wind, which is a stressor, trees feel the pressure, stress. The tree bending is coping. And I use this a lot with kids to help understand that you can't stop the wind. You can't stop what the wind feels like, but you can bend so the wind doesn't break you. And that's what trees do, smart trees. Bad trees break. And we talk a lot about this with younger kids to kind of help them understand. And it's important to separate then for them that sometimes an umbrella is not enough, that sometimes you do need something more in your life besides the umbrella that you carry. Talking about seeking out adults who can mentor you. So a stressor is something that can be inside of us, our own thoughts, all those self-negative things we say about ourselves. It's funny, there was a survey I read, I don't know how they measured it, but they said the average person in a day, you guys guess, how many negative things do you say to yourself from when you wake up to when you go to sleep? What do you think the number is? Anybody have an idea? I don't know how they did the study, but they estimated. 30,000? Does anybody know him? He might need some help. The number they came, was in the thousands. You were close. You don't win the door prize, though. It was actually 2,000 negative comments. And to the amount of positive comments is about 1 to 10 things a day we say to ourselves. Now, before you say, oh, that's stupid, I don't believe that study, just think about it. How many times have you complimented or felt good about something you did today? Did anybody have anything they've done? You sat, you've listened, you learned. Did you say, it feels great to learn. I'm so happy I've learned. Did you say all that? No. So it's weird, isn't it, that we don't encourage ourselves? Oh, I didn't put the coffee on early enough. I didn't buy enough cream. The milk's sour. Oh my God, I need a haircut. What did I do last night? My face looks terrible this morning. Oh, I can't believe this shit. Just the dialogue in the first 10 minutes of awakening. It's amazing, isn't it? So we start to tell kids that a lot of the stress that they feel we do to ourselves. We kind of are self-impaling in a sense. We hurt ourselves. And then there's stress that comes from outside of us we can't do much about. We can't do it when we don't have money, or somebody tries to exert social dominance, tries to bully us or whatever. There's not a lot of things we can do about it. What we can do is we can deal with stress. And we can try to minimize those things we tell ourselves, or the lack of positivity that we have in ourselves, those type of things too. And by managing stress, we have to basically build our competency. That's what we're really going to talk about, that and how to do that and not to do that. Just an aside, pain management is a big issue in our country. Big issue. And what our solution was immediately was to do what? Give addicting, horrible medications to people to turn them into people who are addicted to medications, rather than saying, wait, that may not be so good. So it's sort of that same philosophy. If you have stress, get rid of it, but don't learn from it. If you have pain, don't try to do things that can try to help you tolerate the pain, manage the pain, reduce the pain. We want to just annihilate it by giving us the opiates, which has caused a horrible blight in our country these days. So I guess the point is, stress is good, stress is not bad, but you got to help kids get a little smart in terms of how to manage the level of stress that they have. They don't want to lose too much muscle, just enough to get something done. We also want to try to get rid of the stresses that they cause themselves, things that they tell themselves to make their lives crummy. And as we all said here, 30,000, maybe a little too much, but 2,000, we do say a lot of negative things. Thoughts about that? People are going, I think I said something positive to myself today. Yeah, everybody was searching their brain when I said it. I can see all the, man, has anybody said anything positive to themselves today, about themselves? No. Not yet. So everybody make one self-affirmation, just so I feel better that I'm not. Ready? You can all say it at once, so nobody knows. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Is this the depression workshop? Paige, I think this is the depressed burnout workshop. I'm not running that workshop. Okay, let's all form in groups and let's talk about, no, I'm not going to do that. Let's try it one more. Think of one thing you feel good about yourself today. The way you look, the way you think, the way you feel, the way the shirt looks, whatever it is. Try it one more time with some more gusto. No? Y'all look at me with those stink eyes. Don't do that. 1, 2, 3. What do you think? We'll do it at the end. Maybe it'll get a little bit better. I'm losing this crowd. I don't know. Next, let's just keep moving along. I'm not good. Now, stresses are kind of interesting and important because we often forget about it. What happens sometimes, you look for what causes the outburst, but we don't look what's been going on all along. And sometimes we forget that stressors are cumulative. For example, poverty is a cumulative stressor. Racism, sexism, bias are cumulative stressors that just wear you down after a while. So one incident may cause a reaction, but it's a cumulative stressor. Some things just happen that are shocking and we feel stressed about. But some stressors are just cumulative. Poverty being a big one, certainly discrimination is another one. Sometimes it's the big things in life that get us, the major events, and sometimes it's just those little aggravations, like paperwork. How many people here like paperwork? It's the enemy to anybody who does counseling. Paperwork. Having somebody having to correct the paperwork, having to photocopy the paperwork, having to file the paperwork, having to review the paperwork. It adds up in a little while. It's when the coffee doesn't taste right in the morning. Little. So what happens is sometimes somebody says what's bothering you, and it's not the one thing, it's all the stuff that's accumulating. It happens in relationships. How many people, you don't have to raise your hand, because I know this group doesn't like to raise hands. How many people have been angry at somebody they're living with for something that was stupid? They just got angry because it's all the little stuff that built up, and then suddenly, you don't love me. What do you mean I didn't love you? I just didn't pass the sugar quick enough. You're always doing that. What do you mean? Last night you didn't put the toilet seat down, and the other day you didn't bring in the It's the little. So stressors are tricky that way. Sometimes it's the big things, but sometimes it's the smaller things. But sometimes the cumulative stressors we forget to ask kids about. Now, children, this is probably the most fascinating slide that you have if you look at them. Kids feel most stressed by these stressors: negative evaluation by peers and adults, parent conflict and loss, conflict with an adult, and feeling excluded socially. So what's the commonality of that? The biggest stressors are people, right? So when you have the pandemic and you keep people isolated from people for 2 years, and then you put them in front of people, do you think the kids are going to know how to relate to people? No. And that's why we're having more problems in school with kids getting really violent and kids really acting out and stuff really badly. Well, they've been 2 years without developing the skill on how to deal with people, how to deal with evaluation, how to deal with rejection. And what happens, our kids have lost that important time. And we on the other side have been through that and learned how to develop those skills. The kids don't know how to deal with those stressors. I've heard from people working in schools that kids will want to kill somebody because they made fun of them. They may be angry. In the past, maybe you've gotten into a fist fight, but wanting to kill somebody because they never learned how to deal with that. And it's something that we're in a strange world right now. We're trying to figure that out, but how do we help our kids learn to deal with normal social dominance issues? I'm not excusing bullying or aggression to other people, but a lot of what kids go through and have a hardest time is again, being rejected. And why are kids rejected? Well, because someone else wants to dominate. Someone else wants to be ahead of the herd. Someone else wants to be first. So kids don't know how to deal with that. And if you're kept in your room looking at TV and the teacher talking, how do you learn that? Where do you learn that from? So we're dealing with kind of a crisis in terms of how do kids learn how to build skills at not getting as upset when somebody rejects them, when they're evaluated negatively or they're excluded socially. Big challenge. That's a kind of a shocking slide given all that we went through with the pandemic. Now, a lot of people think that stress is the fight, flight, or freeze. That's extreme stress. Extreme stress. That's when you're scared to death that something bad's going to happen. You go through what's called the autonomic nervous system. And what happens typically is your body reflexively sends out a lot of hormones, right? Normally we have adrenaline in our system. Like if you need to get up out of the chair to go to the bathroom because you have to go to the bathroom, your adrenaline gets activated, you stand up and you go to the bathroom. What happens when you're in danger, it gets supersized. What happens is hormones called glucocorticoids are released in the bloodstream, and that gives you that super stress response. And what happens then is the body becomes a reflex. Everything happens without your being aware of it. And kids get scared by that. So a kid who's frightened by rejection, stressor, has not a normal stress response, has a supersized stress response. Like normally we get rejected every day. We go to the store, we try to talk to somebody, and they talk to somebody else. We just got rejected. We don't get devastated, we don't get angry, but for a kid, they will. It turns into not a stress response, it turns into an extreme stress response. And what happens to extreme stress response is the body behaves differently. For example, if you're racing to get here, you may feel some tachycardia, your heart's beating, you may feel a little tension, but the stress response doesn't kick off. But if you're a kid and you misjudge the stressor and you see it as a real danger, the stress response kicks in. So what are signs that your stress response, that extreme stress response is coming in? Well, you have the fight, flight, or freeze, right? And research, by the way, says you freeze first. Then you decide to run or get away. Anybody who's in a dangerous situation, what do? You freeze. You get bad news, what do? You freeze first. So that's the extreme. But how do kids experience stress? What does it feel like to have extreme stress? We've all felt it. So what does that feel like? How does it feel like physically? Well, one thing that happens is what? When you're under a lot of stress, think about it in a primitive way, all the blood goes where? Back to your torso. Which means, where is the blood not going? Now, which part of the brain is closest to the torso? Back. In the back, the hindbrain is connected to what? Well, your basic functions, including aggression, sexuality, breathing, etc. But this part of your brain, frontal lobe, that's where your decision making comes. It doesn't get fed. So when under a lot of extreme stress, what happens? You get stupid. Your brain's not functioning. This part of the brain is not getting as much blood. It doesn't work as well. You guys know that when you're under a lot of stress, do you think well? No. Back in the day, therapists used to tell patients, when you're in therapy, don't make big decisions. What they're really saying is, if you're under a lot of stress, your brain's stupid. You're not really thinking big issues. Like when someone dies, which is an extremely stressful event, it's hard to plan. And that's why families have to come in and help people with planning, because they're not thinking well. But what also happens to the head is some funny things. Remember, all the fluid is going? So when the fluid's all going, what do? You drink a lot of fluid. Well, where does that fluid go? Into your bladder. But since you're scared, you don't feel your bladder. So you have all those sensations of your stomach shut down. Your eyes get itchy because all the fluid's pulling back. There's less blood to your head, you're hyperventilating, so you're getting a little spacey feeling. Your eyes get what's called focal lock, where you only see in front of you, so you can't really see out of the side of your eyes. So you kind of sometimes think that you're seeing things out of the side of your eyes. Your muscles are getting really tense. But because all the blood's going out there, they're cold and tingly. But the body also secretes sweat. So they're cold and sweaty. I don't know if you've ever had a kid come into your office and you shake their hands and you feel like that fish, cold fish. They're very stressed out because that's the way the body feels. The back, muscle tension. Also the stomach is stopped. All the digestion happens, stops. Heart's beating. Lightheadedness. What does that sound like when a kid talks to you? Panic attack, right? It's they're having an extreme stress response because they've never learned to manage stressors without having an extreme stress response. And what happens then is the kids oftentimes are misdiagnosed. Not all the time there are kids who have panic attacks, but kids get misdiagnosed when they really are just having too much stress that they've never learned to handle a little bit. By the way, when the stress response dies down, all that food in the stomach that's been sitting there starts to get digested, and people have to run to the bathroom, people get diarrhea, people start to have irritable bowel, people start to have colitis worsen, they start to have to urinate more, they start to get headaches because of all the muscle tension and tension in their heads. So explaining what the stress response is to kids helps them feel they're not going crazy. But we don't talk to people about that. We talk about anxiety. Like anxiety is not stress. And I find when working with kids, there are kids with anxiety disorders, but most kids don't know how to manage stress. They don't know how to bring it up and down. And what happens is we know that there are certain medical conditions. We know, anybody been to their doctor who said, stress doesn't cause a lot of it, everything, but it makes it worse. We do know that, by the way, that stress suppresses the immune system. It's extreme stress. So if you have a lot of stress, you're not doing your body any good. And if your heart keeps pumping, what does that do to your heart as a muscle? It weakens the heart. So we know it has a lot of biological consequences later on for the kid. So stress basically is not bad. Stress is life. Stress is something that we have. It's a good thing. It's just the level we got to manage better. It's how we get motivated and how we make changes. And stress is also helps us deal with our feelings and life demands in a lot of ways. And the class's example is I tell students, I don't want any stress. Well, then don't study. I'll get in trouble. That's causing you stress, right? Yeah, then I'll study. Okay, but getting out of bed in the morning, we do a lot of things because we activate the stress response, adrenaline. Staying awake in the afternoon. You're saying, I can't fall asleep. He's looking at me, I can't fall asleep. But again, stress is not a bad thing. Now, stress comes in two packages, eustress and distress. You can have a good thing happen and it causes you a lot of stress. How many people have had good news? Hopefully one person in this room. Oh, thank goodness, some people have had good news. So you get that good news, right? And that happens to you. It causes stress. Why? Because you're thinking about what's going to happen, whether it's the birth of a baby, a job promotion, whatever. It's good news, but it's stressful. It's kind of odd to think, but not all bad things are stressful. Good things can be stressful too. Your son or daughter has a boyfriend. That's good news, right? No, it's not. Your son or daughter passes their road test. Good news? No, it's not. Again, it's eustress, but it's distress. So not everything that we feel stress is bad. Next slide. Winning money is a good thing, but why is it a bad thing? Because you suddenly have friends that you never knew you had. And you have to figure out all that stress of figuring out what to buy. Would you want that? I wouldn't want that stress, would you? No way. I'd like to try it once. I think that would be a nice thing. Now, the other part of stress, remember I talked about cumulative stress? And this is, anybody here ever cram for an exam while they're in school? Good. It's only this side, right here. The rest of you guys, this is the stressed out group. Oh, you did too. Okay, thank you, Roberta. What happens when you cram for an exam is your body starts secreting a lot of stress hormones, and you push your body beyond the limits. You spend an all-nighter, and you work to get something done. You study for a test. Remember the next day after that? How do you feel? Exhausted, right? Exhausted and tired because your body gets exhausted. The price for hitting the stress button to put you in those supercharged cells, you just get exhausted afterwards. So the stress process eventually exhausts people, exhausts the immune system too. How many people after you pulled an all-nighter when you're in college afterwards got sick? It's pretty common. Your body just gets depleted. It's not that you caught something, it's just your body's depleted. And your immune system gets suppressed. So the cumulative stress makes us feel exhausted. Exhausted looks like depression, doesn't it? Because you feel listless, you have no energy, you have no motivation, you're tired. And a kid comes to your office like that, they could be depressed, you have to assess for that, but oftentimes the kid is just exhausted from all the cumulative stress, especially if there's family problems. So a lot of the kids we deal with are bringing into school a lot of family problems that they're dealing with, which are cumulative and just exhaust them after a little while. Now, kids, and this is the other part of the thought process for kids who are under a lot of stress start to think they're going crazy. Remember, the body's doing all these weird things. They think they're having a panic attack. The nurse's office is filled with people before exams with headaches and panic attacks. They think they're imagining things because they're lightheaded and dizzy. They feel they're out of control. They can't calm down. And other people are going to notice. Remember that fear evaluation? It just makes it worse. So oftentimes this is what it feels like for a poor kid who's going through all that high stress. Now I work with kids, and when I talked to them, I said, everybody, any baseball fans here? By the way, I have to ask, and I asked the other group, how many people have a favorite team for the Super Bowl? Okay, yeah. I asked the other group, do they know the Super Bowl's a Sunday? And they said no. So I began to think I'm in another planet, another country, so I didn't know for sure. So my colleague, Dr. Schoenfeld, doesn't like football, and I have just spent Super Bowl Sunday with Dr. Schoenfeld. So he'll be watching the commercials, and I'll be trying to watch in between the commercials. There's this game going on, so I'm trying to watch. But every sport, every activity, there's a good level and there's a bad level of stress that you need. If you notice that, like for example, if you're working with a kid in crisis, you tone it down a little bit in terms of where you are. You're kind of, okay, tell me what's going on. Not, hey, what's going on? You're in crisis. That's cool. What's good? Kid would run out the door. Or hold on, we gotta get the crisis team. What's going on? Are you suicidal? Oh my God, let's get the. Yeah. And with a kid in crisis, if you wait them out, what happens to the level of expressed emotion? It just drops them down a little bit. So I guess we pick the sweet spots, and kids need to see how much muscle they need, emotional muscle they need. They need to get better at figuring out how much that happens. Now, sports are a great way to figure out what adrenaline you need. For example, if you golf, you need to hit the ball, but you don't need a lot of adrenaline. If you're a tennis player, you need to be pretty active. You need to use a lot of adrenaline. So we do it naturally in athletics, but it's lowering the amount of adrenaline that you're putting into your system. Professional athletes, a person is shooting a basket with 1 second left to go on the clock, and he or she is at the foul line, they're ready to shoot. They're calm. You ever see their faces? And they shoot. They're not, they've learned to bring the adrenaline in. And people think professional athletes are really good at monitoring the amount of adrenaline they use, because good times to use it, good times not to use it. Athletes who don't play well use too much adrenaline, they get over aggressive. What happens? They could go for penalties, they make stupid mistakes. And that's kind of important to recognize. So I talk sometimes with kids about that, about finding the sweet spot, levels of stress too. It's not 0 to 10 right away. It is low, medium, high. Stress, by the way, since it's fluid, it's a hormone, doesn't just happen like this. Stress builds. It's little, more. So it's important. Other thing, kids have certain temperaments where they just don't react to things. Some kids, you can drop a book in a room and they're like, I think something happened. Other kids, you drop a book in the room, they're jumping out the window, they're running a temperament. If you've raised your babies when they were kids, if you raise kids, that kids have different temperaments. There's different ways that biology reacts. Again, kids have different temperaments and they'll respond to stress differently. So to bring it all home, you got to help kids reduce stress. You got to also let them not see everything dangerous, but the only way really to do that, and this is the trick, you got to teach them that they can manage it. And we've learned in stress management, basically, that the only way to get resilient is to face something and learn you can handle it. Rejection, failure, mistakes, etc. And we don't do a good job at that. And what happens then is kids start to do what? They start to panic, and they don't learn that basic skill. So they got to learn to reduce stress when handling stressors. They need to plan to face stress a little bit more. They need to learn from setbacks, and they need to see that avoidance is okay. You don't need to face every problem. Sometimes it's good to take a step back, and that's okay. We have a bias sometimes in our culture to face problems head on, and sometimes that's not so good. Sometimes it's good just to back up a little bit. Now, how many people here work with children? You guys raised your arms the slowest. It was like, when you have something going on in your life, now we're supposed to be neutral. Do the kids you work with pick it up right away? It's creepy, isn't it? They know when you're going on vacation. They know when you're not feeling well. They know when a supervisor just yelled at you. They know, they spot it, they pick it up. And they also pick up how you or their parents deal with stress. So they learn that there's a stressor, stress, and here's how we deal with it, what they deal with. They watch us all the time. And what happens then is they use those strategies. But they're doing a bad job because they're learning how not to deal with things in a good way because they watch us all the time. Cultures help us because cultures can provide ways. For example, faith-based groups. If you believe in a faith, usually faiths help you put things in perspective. They help you see things in a broader base, right? It helps you reduce how you react to stressors, but we don't use it that often. Kids don't have that really skill and support. We're good at teaching kids bad ways to deal with stress. Look in that list. Any of them, you, when you're in distress? We overeat, we use alcohol and other chemicals, we smoke, gamble, we browse the internet too long, we shop, watch too much television, we get lost in social media, and we yell and argue. We also, with kids, avoid, we numb, we blame others, we withdraw, we risk taking or engage in dangerous activity when we get too stressed, and we either are dependent or not ask for help. So we don't really teach children good ways to handle stress. We teach them all the ways that are going to cause more complication. And that's really something to kind of sort out a little bit. Now, this is kind of what I was talking about is like if a child comes to you with a problem, a child comes into your office and says, hey, I'm having problems with my teacher. What's the first thing we usually do? What do you do when a child comes to see you and says, I'm having problems with my teacher? I'll go talk to them for you, which doesn't teach the child anything because you're fixing a problem for them. They're not taking command. What else do we do? Usually, not you, but what do we usually do? We said, what are you doing to contribute? We blame the child. We put all the responsibility. Or we ask, well, let's figure out ways you can handle it. We give them tools. All sounds fair, right? But do we ask the child, how do you feel about that? What's that doing for you? How's it going? Tell me what that's like for you. We usually, no, I'm guilty. I worked in a school. Kid got into a fight in the schoolyard. Okay, what happened? Who set it up? What did he say to you? Right away, I'm being the detective. I'm being the problem solver. And I'm saying, well, now I would if I was, going back in that time machine. Where you're always smarter when you go back in that time machine. I would say, wow, you look pretty upset. What's going on inside? Tell me what you're feeling now. What's going on? How's your body feeling? We don't do that. And how are you going to cope with those feelings? Okay, let's talk about that first. We'll get into what happened or what you're upset about, but let's hear from you. That's called emotional focused coping. We tend to lean on very much so problem focused coping. You got to eventually do the problem focused work, but we forget that we lead with the problem and we never get to the feelings. So kids get their problem solved. Then, if you're a good counselor, remember time machine? I can be perfect in the past because never when I'm in a situation. We make sure we have the child has an internal locus of control by saying, okay, you're feeling kind of bad, you're feeling kind of sad about what happened. Okay, tell me, what's your take on, did it work for you? Did you think that was the best choices you made? Versus, that was wrong, right? You did the wrong thing, blaming the child. Versus, hey, you got upset. It sounds like you're pretty hurt. Your feelings are hurt. And I guess you made some choices. How do you evaluate those choices you made? Internal locus of control versus you did the wrong thing. Let's brainstorm about how to fix this for you. But are you teaching the kid anything? Are you teaching them how to deal with stress, or are you fixing it for them? Again, that's more than internal versus an external locus of control, because you're not giving this kid control over their lives by teaching them to do that. But we do that too often with kids, depending on their age. When a kid comes in saying something to me, I always say, it's my token response, is that working for you? Tell me, I'm sure you guys have used that too. Is that working for you? You told the teacher to F off. Okay, it's colorful, but is that working for you? What do you mean? What happened? I'm here in your office. Guess that means it's not working for you. If you had to go back in that time machine, what would you have done differently? I would have just, but there's history to this. Tell me about the history. You start moving back a little bit. And then you say, well, I guess last week she did this and that, but it seems like you got a lot of anger going on. Well, why'd you get so angry? What was going on? Do you follow? It's different than, you have a problem with the teacher. You need to apologize. Let's write a thank you letter. I'll call the principal and the teacher. We'll have a conference. Don't worry, your parents won't get involved. We'll fix it for you. Let's go back in class. Kid goes back and learns, if I do that again, I'm going to see Demaria. That's torture. I don't want to sit with the shrink again. I'm not going to do that. which sometimes mental health people use, like we're like the parole officer in school. But we're not teaching the kid how to not do that. You don't curse at people. That's verbal violence. It's a type of violence. But again, we don't do that, but we fix it. Or we try to encourage the other strategy we fall into. You have to approach everything. If there's a problem, what are you going to do about it? Well, sometimes you don't have easy solutions. And how many times have you worked with a kid who has a problem? I don't know the answer just yet. We probably have to talk more about it. Let's put it off for a day or two. What are you teaching a child to put it off for a day or two? What's the skill you're teaching the child? Low frustration tolerance. You don't gratify them right away. Well, you can have to come see me again. That's not a punishment, but I think you need to sit on this for a day and kind of let it sink in a little bit. Let's figure it out tomorrow. Let's sort out the answer tomorrow versus let's get a meeting together with your teacher. Let's sort this out. Let's figure out do you follow the gradation here? Your goal is not to fix the problem. Your goal is to help the child learn how to deal with stress. And then the next time it won't happen because you're a good stress manager. It's like when you get pain, you stub your toe and you have pain, your foot hurts. Right away, do you take a Tylenol? Or do you say, that hurts? It probably will go away. Let me give it a little while to see if it's broken. Let me put some ice on it if it really bothers me. And then, why did I stub my toe? Oh, that dresser is too close to the hallway. Maybe. Do you follow? It's a different type of thinking versus right away running to get the Tylenol. And it happens. Remember getting all this? I know it's the afternoon, the food haze, and the Friday weekend haze is hitting you guys. See it glowing in the room. It's fun in there. And your eyes are staying open. That's good. That's good. It's how do we help our kids manage their stress, not let it turn into extreme stress. Keep it in the sweet spot. Know how to use enough to get the job done. But how do we help them take control of their lives? You can start with little kids too. Johnny pushed me in the schoolyard. So what do? I hit him on the head with my lunchbox. Is that working for you? Well, he cried. Oh, how are you feeling about that? I hate him. He's terrible. Oh, okay. Now, when you feel that way, where do you feel that in your body? Oh, my tummy hurts and my head hurts. Oh, okay. Do you like to feel that way? No. Oh. Let's go back. What would have been another way you could have probably done something there? Well, I could have talked to the teacher. Young kids will do that. Or I could have just let it go. Older kids, you help walk them through. And what do you about that anger, that stress you were feeling? Do you think you need to be better at measuring all that? What do you need to do next time, maybe to keep the stress down? I'll take a deep breath. Okay. I'll think it's not worth it. Okay. With bullying, anytime you answer a bully back, sometimes you're giving the bully more control over you. When you let an aggressive person cause a reaction, they're controlling you. With adolescents, I tell them, that always gets out. They're not controlling me. Well, they are. If they pick on you and you respond, let them show they're getting to you. Sometimes you have to set limits. Sometimes you have to do things, but you don't let them have control. You don't want to live rent-free in your head. Well, show them that you don't put up with this stuff, that you're not going to respond to it. So you teach them how not to respond to the bully. And these are just examples of the motion versus problem solving. So getting back to coping, and this is a big mistake we make with coping strategies. Now, next one. Okay. A big mistake we make with stress management is, and hopefully I've not given you that impression, the goal of stress management is to reduce stress or keep stress manageable. Yeah, but then life is boring. What does it take to do good stress management? You got to have what in your life? Happiness, right? So how many people have ever been on a diet in this room? Only two honest people, thank you. I think I'm perpetually dieting. I think I was dieting since I was born. I think it's part of growing up. When you diet, it's misery, right? And you have to deal with denial, and you have to deal with frustration, you have to deal with pressure and all that good stuff. So you're dealing with the stress of dieting. Dieting is a stressor that causes stress. But if you diet and you don't encourage yourself and feel happy about it, what happens to the dieting? And typically it's weight, want to step on the scale, or clothes fit better, or if you have a sensitive spouse or partner, they say, wow, it looks like you're losing weight, even if it was 2 ounces. It still feels good, right? So what we don't do with stress management is we don't build in rewards or happiness. And we don't build in that portion too. So you want to teach children, now, when you deal with all that stress of not letting yourself get very angry at someone who gets you upset, what good things can you do to self-reward yourself? What can you do to make yourself feel happy? How do you say to yourself, I did a pretty good job? How do you get that into your mind? And that's really important. And the stress management checklist, if you can, that's okay. If you can, you can go ahead. When Paige listens to the presentation, she's already a steps ahead of me. She's just trying to encourage stress. She's the stressor, I'm the stress. If you can read this, God bless you. We will send copies of the slides to you. I'll make sure you guys get copies too. But these are things that you talk to people about. Stress management means there's dealing with a stressor, but there's also lowering your body's level of stress. Now, one of the myths, and this is kind of something I can share with you guys, does anybody in your family really understand what you do? Honestly, have you ever tried to explain to someone who's not in the helping field, the mental health field, what you do all day? Have you tried? Does it work? No. How many people have had a good conversation with their spouse, friends, partner, family, and talked about what you did all day, and they go, oh, I get it. Does that happen? One person, God bless you. You have to tell me how you did it, because, but mostly, unless they're in the field themselves. Oh, they're in the field. Oh, okay, they're in the field. But most of the time, and it's Friday afternoons, Friday afternoon crisis hour. When a crisis happened, Friday afternoon, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I worked at a mental health clinic. We'd get calls from schools. It's 3 o'clock again. I'd get calls from all the school. We have suicidal kids. We have suicidal kids. So what do you do with all that stress at work? Where's it go? It magically transforms itself in the car. And it flows all out your window? No, it's still there. So how do you do a decompression chamber walking back into the house? How does that happen magically? And most of us don't do it. So we have a hard day at work, hassles, sometimes big events, worry, right? We go into the house and suddenly everything's fine. I live work at work. No, you don't. And the reverse is, how many people have had problems at home and you don't bring it to school at work? You do. If your kid is sick, if your house is falling apart, if you have something wrong with your car, you're worrying about it during the day, aren't you? We have this weird world that we think we can split our life up in some way and we won't feel these things. We do bring them. So stress management means you have a way of bringing down the overall stress level outside of a specific stressor. It's kind of a way to kind of step back a little bit. And some of these include hobbies, socializing with friends, journaling. By the way, does anybody have a friend they can just complain to? You do? The rules of that is you have to have a friend you can complain to and they won't give advice. That's a real good friend. So I'll call my friend Tim and I'll go, Tim, yep, I just want to complain for a while. You're not going to say what I'm saying. I just want to complain just for 5 minutes. Or we'll go out. And then they just go, yeah, it sucks. Okay, thanks, bye-bye. Versus, what happened? And who said that? And what did they do? No, you're not getting it. Sometimes it's nice just to have that person to vent with. It's good with colleagues to have that, but sometimes you can have a friend outside the field that can do it. But these are just a list of stuff, including dancing, laughing, exercise, romance. I'm getting the dead eyes again. The romance is possible. It's still out there. Somewhere it's out there for you. It's a Friday. I'm trying to encourage you guys for the weekend. Okay. Relaxation, though, is the primo uno. Now, honesty question. Ready to be honest? You guys back there, you ready to be honest? Okay. How many people practice relaxation every day? 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow, fantastic. What do you guys do to relax each day? Non-chemical. Never. I should have put that qualifier right away. Happy hour is not relaxation. I should have qualified that right away. So what do you guys do on a daily basis, sir? Exercise? What you do? Crochet? Knit? But that was like There's like 50 people in the room, that was like 4. So we have 46 people every day who don't have a decompression every day to bring themselves down a little bit. So from the people who do, it just helps get rid of all that stress a little bit. And exercise is great, but other things are great too. But relaxation, it doesn't cost you any money to do some basically focused breathing. You guys know what I'm talking about? Again, I'm getting the looks from you guys. What is this? Has anybody done focused breathing work? Okay. Breathe in through your nose, count 1, 2, out through your nose, count through. Breathe with your diaphragm, not with your chest. Okay. Just doing that for 10 minutes when you get home. You lock the bathroom door, you put a lock on it. You still get it. Or you sit in the car and you don't get in the house, and you just do some basic breathings. Or you can do aggressive muscle relaxation, go for a massage, wonderful way to relax. Exercise was mentioned, guided imagery, thinking of a nice place, your safe place. Pleasurable experience, taking a nice warm bath or warm shower. Sometimes I just take a warm shower after I get home, just feels good. Just meditation, prayer. We pray, that's a nice way to kind of get there too. Hobbies, you mentioned too, creativity. Yoga, Tai Chi, warmth, when the sun is shining, just being out in the sun can feel good too. So we had about 5 people said they do it every day for themselves. How many you routinely teach students you work with relaxation skills? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have 10 people who do it. So do you understand why it's important? Because they need to learn to bring the stress levels down. They need to better manage stressors, but they need to bring it down. So if you haven't included this in your repertoire with kids, it's kind of important to kind of think about doing it. Breathing is easy, except if the kid has asthma. I once did a relaxation exercise, a visualization exercise. Sometimes life is funny what you encounter. So I did this great image thing of a person being in the field, the woods, and walking, and the sun beating through the trees and the warm grass. And the kid he goes, "What's the matter? What's the matter? I'm afraid of ticks." So then I said, "Let's do a beach scene. You put your feet in the water. I'm afraid of sharks." So what makes you relax? Being out of space. Okay. Never been there, but tell me. So we had to develop a relaxation script. He was floating in the space, seeing the earth and whatever. It's okay. It worked for him. But again, you just got to do something with the kids to get them to relax. And yourself too. You can't teach relaxation if you don't practice it yourself. So one time this weekend, in a non-chemical way, you're going to practice a little bit of relaxation, even if it's just doing breathing for a few minutes or curling your toes. You ever do that over a golf ball? You curl your toes over a golf? No. I'm going to have to send you guys golf balls. You get a golf ball and you just roll your toes in the bottom of it. It's a nice way to kind of feel relaxed. Okay. Body wellness, you guys are aware of that with exercise and stuff too. Sleep, by the way, is the number one source of problems for high school kids. They don't get enough sleep. And when they don't get enough sleep, the brain doesn't work. And when they don't get enough sleep, they don't manage stress well. When your kids were young and they weren't sleeping, they'd be overtired and cranky. But adolescents don't sleep at all. They're up late at night gaming or talking to friends and social media. They get up early to go to school and they're exhausted. And again, that leads to their lack of ability to handle stressors. So sleep is important too. So these are my compilation of excuses for people not to change their stress management habits. I have a couple on there. I'm not going to tell you which ones, but I work on them. But these are some of the excuses. I don't have enough time. I have too many school requirements. I'm a perfectionist. My family has needs and obligations. I have been over-involved in after-school activities. I can't do it because I have other images and thoughts that come in my head if I do, if I don't stay busy. I don't have personal space. I have too many appointments. It's too complicated to plan. It's not worth the time. I'll start tomorrow. Procrastination. I don't think I'm worth it. I have family or social obligations. There's personal family problems at this time. I'm exhausted and too tired. And other people think I'm selfish. Anybody on that list? No? In terms of not? We have one honest person here too. Not that you guys are not honest. Yeah, but I'm out usually about 2 or 3 at a time when I look at it myself. But again, sometimes you have to challenge ourselves a little bit. Now to the meat and potatoes, the resiliency stuff. Remember we talked about that. And there are a lot of people in our life, when I work with teenagers especially, I talk about people who've had crummy lives and they've gotten past it. For example, people like Abraham Lincoln who had depression. We had Walt Disney who had poverty. We had Oprah Winfrey who came from a home that was wrought with child abuse. A lot of people have been through bad things and they've gotten past it. Doesn't mean they're damaged forever, but they rose above it. So because something bad happens to you doesn't mean it means you're going to have a bad life. It just means that it's going to be incumbent upon you to work a little bit more to develop good resiliency skills. And we've all had those obstacles. If I went around the room and we weren't being tamed, people would share what obstacles they've had to overcome. But we all have been through that. If I had an anonymous survey, I would guarantee everybody here has had some challenge, something. And you might be going through it right now. And my heart's to you too. But we all have those things that we've had to put on our shoes in the morning and keep going. Sometimes, whether it's the loss of somebody or our life's not the way we want it to be, it's tough. And we've all been through that, but we don't give up. But what made us not give up? Because we learned not to. Now, resiliency is something we're born with, but we don't let people practice it. It's called ordinary magic. You don't acquire resiliency, you have it. We just don't let our kids have it enough. We don't let them adapt to changes. We don't let them bounce back. And we have two different types of parents. The parents who neglect their kids and let them face life in a way we're not teaching them how to deal with life. And we have the other category of parents where they do everything for the child. And it's hard because you have both. And I know you guys deal with parents all the time. Sometimes you don't have that middle ground a little bit to help children learn resiliency. But you have to take risk. You have to expose yourself in order to be resilient. You don't get resilient because you wake up one day and you do it. You have to practice it. Anybody here ever coach a sports team? Learn more about losing the game than by winning, because you'll learn by losing to look at what you did and think about it and how you tolerate losing, which is why I used to work with coaches for a while, and the out of control coaches. And I did that for a while. And I realized that they didn't realize that by helping the kids learn how to lose well and build from that, you make stronger kids, then a kid is always winning if you're always on a winning team. It's nice to be on a winning team, but you never learn to lose. I had one young man, it was sad, I worked with. He had a charmed life, affluent family. He went to an Ivy League school, was hired by a top 10 accounting firm, and life was wonderful for him. And they laid him off, and he tried to kill himself. Saw him in my office, and I said, well, tell me about your life, charmed life. I said, my parents fixed everything for me. They helped me somebody study. They had trainers, they had coaches. I said, did you ever have to face adversity? And he goes, no. So here's a young man in his 20s who never learned how to get up after he was down. It was kind of sad to hear. So he had to learn from square bottom how to get back and build his life up after having nothing. So parents, does anybody want to voice anything about parents they work with? Camera's on, so you have to couch it a little bit. But parents you work with are challenging, right? Because every parent has their own ideas, and that's good. And every parent wants to do something, but parents don't know how to do resiliency well. And again, they either over or under support children. And this is my rules to teach parents. If you have a parent night, or if you want to talk to parents, I say you got to allow mistakes in your kids. You got to let them make the mistakes and support them. Don't fix the mistakes for them. You got to help identify lessons learned. You got to let them learn to listen first and then ask questions later. We all want to jump in, got to listen. We encourage problem solvings of their kids. What'd you learn? Where you going with that? Did that work for you? Versus you trying to fix it all for them. You got to teach about personal decision making and problem solving. You got to allow your child to try their own ideas. Let's try it your way. It may not work. I don't know if you've ever worked with your son or daughter doing projects around the house. You know it's not going to work, but you got to let them try. And when it doesn't work, you say, okay, maybe we can do it another way. What way do you think? Because if you don't let them try it their way, they're never going to learn that you can fail. Mom and dad's not going to wig out, flip out, yell at you. And you can make it better next time. But that's how you build resiliency. And this is a hard one, is that your children's successes and failures are not about you. That's a tough one for parents. Don't personalize it. You're trying to raise a good human being, not a good clone of you. What they do is different. It's not about you, which is why parents react when kids are bullied so much, which we'll talk about in a sec. Encourage independence as a positive goal, but recognize that adolescents are human adult bodies in a kid's brain. Isn't that a good way to describe adolescence? And they don't really grow. They still need us. And again, understand the children are always watching you in terms of how you behave. So parents need to be consistent, non-critical during difficult times, who helps with problem solving if requested. The child has that control. And we know that we model sometimes support instead of fear. Kids learn how to be afraid of things. And we don't want to model that. And we also want to allow freedom if there's more trust. This is a big concept. I'm sure you guys use it already, but the classic is driving the car. I want to drive the car. Parents fight with the kids about that all the time. And I said, well, what's the issue here? I want to drive. I'm ready to drive. I passed my road test. I don't see why mom and dad won't do it. They don't trust me. I don't want him. He's only 17 years old. He shouldn't be driving. It's dangerous out there. People drink, and there's car accidents every year. Okay. So how do you handle that? Refer them? Okay. I have a colleague who can work with you. I tell them, I think you're both kind of wrong. It's not behind a glass or anything. I say it in a nice way. I say, you're both kind of wrong about this. He said, well, trust is not an all or nothing. You earn trust. Trust goes up and down. You want your parents to trust you this much, but your trust is only here. And you don't trust your child at all, but you really should trust them here. So how does your son earn enough trust where you can let him take more and more risk and have more independence? But you don't just give it out, he has to earn it. So again, parents don't do that. They get into their stance and things, and what happens is it turns into fighting when it's really about earning trust. And you can go backwards and forwards. You guys, how many here are in committed relationships? You raised even lower. I'm like, I didn't say happy. I said committed relationships. Whew, I had to watch. This is a rough crowd in the afternoon. You trust your committed relationship person this much, but sometimes you trust them this much. Sometimes yes, no? Not that you don't trust them at all, that they're going to cheat on you or leave you or steal from you, but sometimes people do dumb things. They just don't think of you, they're thinking of themselves. Isn't that part of relationships? So you say, not that I don't trust you, you say, I'd like to trust you more that you're looking after my needs, but when you go out with your friends and I don't see you for 2 days, I trust you a little bit less. It's not an all or nothing. This is a hot topic. I think we'll move from this one, right? You encourage your children to build resilience, to face their fears one step at a time. You don't have to jump in the snake pit. You can look at pictures of snake first. You work step by step. You don't want to overwhelm kids. And what to do with bullying? Same issue, right? Anybody here ever work with kids or parents with bullying? Did it work out well? Anybody want to share their horror story? I don't want to put you guys on camera with that, but the biggest problem is social dominance is part of the world. It's part of the animal kingdom. It's part of the world. We have winners and losers in life. We have people who buy the nice houses and people who can't afford the nice houses. We have people cut in lines at supermarkets. People cut you off on the road. People who want to be prettier. It's part of life. There's social dominance. But how do you deal with when your kid faces social dominance? How do you tell your parents how to deal with it? Now, what do dads typically say when a kid is pushed by somebody? You go into school the next day and do what? Punch him in the nose. What do moms say the next day to the kid? Tell the teacher. Kid world, telling the teacher makes you what? Peer evaluation. High stressor. Punching a kid, what happens? You get put on in-school suspension or labeled as being, aggressive with sprinkles or something by somebody and put in a, permanent file. You're filed. And you tell parents, you and your kid are both wrong with this. What's going on with this? Social dominance is part of life, but how do you learn how to deal with aggressive people? Isn't that a skill? Which shouldn't be. I'd like to live in flowers with unicorns and pink clouds and candy everywhere, but people can be aggressive. Isn't that true? Maybe not in Georgia. In New York, they are. So. And on the plane, Atlanta airport, they're aggressive. Jeepers. My luggage was knocked over 3 times. They must have been New Yorkers coming down, not people from Georgia. So how do you deal with those people? Well, you make sure you do what? You deal with your reaction. Remember, like with stress, you handle your emotions. You make sure you pick the right amount of muscle to handle the situation. Sometimes it's asserting yourself. Sometimes it's not letting yourself be a victim anymore. Sometimes it is telling people, but you don't use your hands right away. Why? Because that leads to more problems. So it's the same thing. And if a parent fixes the child's aggressive interaction with somebody, what does the child learn about the next one? So then the kid brings dad's gun to school because they never learn how to deal with aggressive peers or social dominance. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but social dominance is something like stress that kids need to learn to master. They only master it if they learn how to deal with it in small dosages. And if parents get involved and have big conferences and want the kid who was aggressive shot or something, I don't know, parents get really angry. It doesn't help the kid learn how to deal with those kids in the future. It's really important. If you give advice to your kids, parents in the room, whenever you tell your advice to kids, what happens when it doesn't work out? It's all your fault. You gave me the bad advice. If it works, I didn't really make the decision. Why should I be happy? You should be happy you made the decision. Never works out. If you tell kids what to do, it's true, isn't it? Nobody likes to be told. So it's got to be their idea, or you can help them get to that place. But again, it's that skill of learning how to handle problems. Now, parents are really good at motivators and demotivators. Do you know what I mean by that? It's things your parents say. How many people have children in this room? How many people not willing to admit they have children in this room? Now I'm going to put some things on this. This is the honesty test. Have you ever said this to your kids in some form or not? These are called demotivators for kids. When I was your age, do what I say, not as I do. We are greatly disappointed in you. Kids today don't know how easy they have it. Because I said so. I have never seen someone so lazy. I hear that every week with my teen parents. You must be stupid if you don't see what to do. I am busy now. Can we speak about this later? And text me every 10 minutes when you're not at home. How does that foster resiliency in kids? Just tell me how that works to get kids feel they have parent support, they can make mistakes. Do you see how that kind of undermines everything? And it's subtle, but it really works against kids' parents really feeling they can tackle things. Suddenly they lose all energy and they're at a place where they don't find motivation. So how do you help parents recognize that sometimes what they say doesn't help the kids face the challenge, go on their quest to be stronger? How do you see that sometimes we say things to kids that takes away all their energy, takes away all their motivation, and we demotivate kids by saying these stuff? And the best wishes, parents ultimately, I hope, love their kids to some degree. Some don't, that's sad, but most do. Most parents want to do the right thing. I always take the philosophy, parents want to do the right thing, sometimes just don't know because they were raised by their own parents who didn't know the right thing and taught them the wrong thing to do. So that's why I think stress and resiliency, teach your kids to be independent in a gradual way. Help encourage their ideas, give them support if needed, don't be heavy-handed with them, talk about their feelings. Again, these are all good things, but this package and calling it stress and resiliency, it sells better to parents, then you're really a crappy parent. I'm sorry for saying that word. You got to get better. That doesn't work too well because parents don't like to be called that. Parents like to do the right things. They intend to do the right things, but sometimes they just need to learn how to do it a little bit better. And there are better ways to help them. Next slide. Now, when you see a resilient child, they're out there. They're the kids who like to learn. They're positive. They should tell you positive emotions, like you guys do every day, right? They're optimistic, right? They act as their own cheerleader. They encourage themselves. They find satisfaction when they get something done. They make sense of what happens to themselves. They make meaning of their lives. They use good coping skills. And they connect to a competent, caring adult in the family or community if they need it. There was a study about children in South Central Los Angeles, a classic study. And they found two things help children get out of cycles of poverty and crime. What were the two factors that they found? I don't know if you guys know this study. What were the two predictors kids cited as how they got out of an environment of impoverishment? One caring adult. One. Doesn't necessarily have to be a parent who is consistently available to them. Just one. Could be an aunt, could be an uncle, could be a teacher. And a lot of them cited school people. One caring adult and a 6th grade reading level. So you need school, but you need that caring adult. And you could be the only person, especially some of the parents you work with are not those people. Kids come in with stories of what could go on at home. That's the stressor. How do you handle that stressor? Let's work and figure out how you can handle that stressor, how you can handle it, how you can keep your stress levels down. When dad says mean things to your mother or mom is drinking and throws the bottle against the wall, okay, that's a stressor. How do you handle that? How do you bring that down? Obviously, you want to ensure the kid's safety and make sure the child's safe and alert child protective, but how do you help a kid deal with that situation versus saying, oh, that's terrible? It's what it is. It's not what we like, but how do you help kids face that stressor, develop competency, learn how to manage feelings like the parents are not doing? Not that the parents are not trying in their own way, but they just didn't learn the right way. And sometimes parents get stuck in bad habits that they learn themselves. Kids who are resilient view things as challenges, embrace change and loss as part of life, and they accept that disappointments and mistakes are part of learning. You fall down, you get up, you make a mistake, it's okay. They make informed decisions, they set goals and small steps, they accept imperfections. I tell kids, I gotta break it to you, you're not perfect. I gotta share it too, I'm not perfect. And you know this world's not perfect. Example of that, turn on the news any night, any day. You see an imperfect world. And that's kind of something that we have to help kids understand a little bit more and try to promote hope. If they learn these skills, they'll be able to face the future in a better way. Now, I've been through horrific situations. I've been at Sandy Hook, where those young children were murdered. I've been in Parkland. I still work at Parkland since the shooting. And I can tell you that what's interesting about scary events, most kids, believe it or not, after a bad thing, go back to normal. The resiliency is there. But there's a category of kids, and this is kind of amazing, who get to be better people. They grow. It's about 15 to 20% will go up. There's a 15 to 20% will be struggling because of it. It's just too much stressors for them to manage. They pick up too much stress. But what happens to the kids who do grow, they improve their relationships with other people. They understand new roles and possibilities. They're aware of their strengths. They increase their faith or spiritual life. They report new appreciation for their faith life. And they appreciate life more. People ask me why I work with people who have post-traumatic stress. I work with veterans. I work with people in law enforcement. I work with people who are crime victims. I work with firemen. I work with a lot of people who have been traumatized. And I said, but they see the world in such a clear way. They really appreciate things a lot better. They don't come in complaining about the small stuff. They see the big picture. And those are the folks who have post-traumatic growth that are out there. So to bring it all home, thank you for not falling asleep on me this afternoon. And hopefully you guys will try to practice relaxation and say positive things to yourself, but try to include with the kids you work with, if you can, some of this whole resiliency, stress, it really makes a big difference. And sometimes you can't climb the mountain with the kid, but you can at least take them up the trail so they can carry it themselves. So before we finish up, we got a few more minutes. I'm sorry, it's Friday. Got one more inspiring person at the end to speak. So just want to see if people have any comments or questions about this. Does this make sense? Yes. Yeah, we'll get a copy of the slides, sure. Anybody else? Yes.
When dealing with children that don't feel like they can sit down with an adult or a parent and have a conversation, do you feel like allowing them that opportunity helps with them managing stress and what's really bothering them?
That's a great question. A lot of children have learned not to trust adults or not to feel safe around adults. And because of that, they think they have it to do it all on their own. There's a lot of studies on gangs, or somebody brought up at a prior presentation about cliques. People form gangs to feel safe because adults haven't made them feel safe. For whatever reason, we as adults haven't protected our kids. So they form gangs among themselves. So you have young children trying to process the world together, which is not a healthy thing. And oftentimes they resort to violence or exaggerated social dominance. So how do you use your relationship with the child to let them know there may be at least one adult that can listen to you, that can validate you, and help move them along and teach them about stress, about resilience, about coping. Yeah, really important thing. But helping a child feel safe in the room is hard. When I work with adolescents, I don't know if you have that. My practice, they come in, and after cursing at me for 10 minutes and not wanting to be there, and psychology is stupid, I'm ugly, different parts of my anatomy they don't like. So eventually I just say, wow, it must be hard for you to be here. Yeah, it is. I'm sorry for making it harder, but what do you want to do with the next 45 minutes? And eventually they'll talk. And I'll hear from those kids who may come from one session. I have one child, young man, he went in and out of jail, and he got a call from him many years later. He says, Doc, I just want to call you and say thank you. I said, what? I realized there was one person in this world who still cared about me. I said, but I only saw him one session. But that's all he needed. And hopefully, haven't heard back from him soon, it will help him get back to a better place. But a lot of kids don't trust adults. And if you watch the news, there's a lot of reasons not to trust adults. We're not doing such a great job with the world sometimes. But we're not perfect. The world's not perfect, and they're not imperfect. Anything else you guys want to share? Comments? No? Yes, sir.
Any suggestions on when working with kids that are very closed off or don't see, I would call it like, a roadblock to them seeing the hope. You're holding the hope to them. We see this, but they're not willing to, like leading the horse to water.
Now, it's a great issue. It's a child who comes in who doesn't have any hope and has given up, so to speak. And one thing I know with any adolescent, especially, if you say yes, what do they say? No. Kids are very sensitive to being dominated or being controlled. So you get into power dynamics where they don't want to share things. Now, sometimes the negativity because of depression, but sometimes it's because no one's helped me. No one's really let them express what it feels like to be where they are. So sometimes when kids are really negative, I'm saying, I got to be honest, I don't really fully understand exactly where you are, but I'd like to learn. Can you just help me explain where you are and where you're coming from? I promise I won't be a shrink. I won't say anything, but just tell me what it's like to be you on a day-to-day. And has it always been like this, or has it gotten worse? And tell me, let me into your world. Let me get there. And then if I get there and there's trust a little bit, and it's hard, and you might get pushed back and forth, at least they know someone's listening to them. There is someone who's available to them. They may not avail themselves of the opportunity, but there's somebody who's willing to at least listen to them a little bit. And then after that, I said, well, let's look at how you manage stuff. What kind of things are going on in your life that are coming at you right now? Tell me about it. I don't call them stressors. I get them to talk about stressors. And I said, what's really getting to you the most? Trying to figure out which stressor they're reacting to the most with stress. And so what do you do with all that like pain that you have? Where does that go? Is it cutting, self-mutilating? Is it aggression? Is it drug taking? Is it aggression? Where are you doing with all that pain and misery? Where does that go? It's got to find an outlet somewhere. So you teach them about negative coping. You find out the negative coping, and it's, well, do you think that's the best thing for you, right? In terms of you, is that really the best place for you to be? Maybe, is that working for you? It's kind of, I get to that eventually. That's kind of how I inch my way in. But first, I start with their world, and I admit that I don't know what it's like to be 16. I did once, 1,000 years ago. I've already given up trying to be cool, and I look at words on the internet. It's kind of sad. I can't use my old analogies about Gilligan's Island anymore. Is that good? Oh, the monsters in Gilligan's Island. I realize even my metaphors are kind of crummy, but I try to explain to him what it's like to be 16, 17. Tell me what that's all about. To be a male or a female, or to be transitioning. Tell me what it's all about. Let me learn. That's kind of a good thing with any culture, really, to be open that way. So and I'm sure you try too. And it's dealing with the frustration that even if it doesn't work, at least somebody tried,
Well, like for example, thank you for kind of reaffirming that I'm on the right track there, but there's like, you mentioned busy work, let's take someone who's cutting. And they, in their head, are 100% that cutting is working for them. That's how they feel a release. It doesn't hurt anybody else. They feel good. They're not suicidal. That's a hard thing to like.
Well, cutting, but for example, I've had kids who do fentanyl or opiates or whatever, and I said, it feels good. Yeah, it must feel good. It's like cocaine. It feels all good. But what's the drawback to it? Is there any drawback, any downsides to it? I don't deny that there is pleasure. It's just what's the any drawbacks to cutting yourself, like anything, infections or cutting, or what it does to your body, anything like that? You try to get them to see, well, instead of cutting, it seems like cutting, you need relief. So if there's relief, there must be a lot of things building in you. What's going on in your world that you need to build to get the release? Oftentimes cutters are numb, dissociative, disconnected. Sometimes they have prior trauma. Yeah. Sometimes they don't want to open that up too. They say they don't want to let the tiger out of the cage sometimes, or they don't want to let it all out. So it's tough because the more you push, the more you get, the more they get frightened. And you're all constrained as a school because you can't see the kids 6 days a week or 7 days a week. You got to let them go home after you see them. So it's a tough call sometimes. But the cutters are worrisome because it does sometimes develop into suicidality, because that line of thinking kind of gets them to think sometimes that suicide is a solution, when suicide is an act of a disordered mind. It's a mind that's not working. So you can kind of help them start to see that a little bit and see hope and introduce all these concepts. But it's hard. It's a tough thing, and good luck with your work. Okay, hopefully this helps a little bit. Anybody else? You're still hanging in there? Okay. It's 1:59. Oh, yes, one more thing.
Real quick, is there a particular age to really start kind of letting a child know that they can trust an adult that could possibly help?
The issue is what age do you help a child learn that adult is trustworthy? Young kids have stranger anxiety for a lot, and they just trust parents. But if they don't have parents they can trust, it's good to show them there are other adults out there. So typically at that preschool age, they start to learn that there are other people that can be positive and happy for them, unlike their parents, and that can be a nice role model for them. So the earlier you can start with the kids, the better, to help them start to feel safe. Thank you guys so much for hanging in there, and nice working with you.